I didn't believe in fate. Not until it showed up on my doorstep, uninvited, and flipped my life upside down. The day my wife, Clara, was in the accident was the day everything I thought I knew about her and about myself was shattered. But let me take a step back, because to understand what happened, you have to understand where I was at before everything fell apart. I was the kind of guy who didn't ask too many questions. My life, my marriage, they were solid. Or so I thought. I never looked for problems where there weren't any, and Clara and I had always lived a relatively calm, uneventful life. People might even say we were the perfect couple. We didn't fight, we didn't argue, and we didn't keep secrets. At least, that's what I thought. It all started when I got the call. Clara, on the other end, trying to sound calm, but I could hear it in her voice. Something was off. "Jack," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I was in a car accident. But I'm fine. I swear I'm okay." I'd never been good with those types of calls. My mind went immediately to worst-case scenarios. "Where are you? What happened? Are you sure you're okay?" I'm fine. Really?" Clara sounded more frustrated than anything. I could almost hear her rolling her eyes. "It was just a fender bender, but I'm at the hospital now. They're checking me out just to be safe." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. The rational part of me knew that it couldn't be that bad if she was calling me, but the other part, the paranoid part, was already thinking about how much could go wrong. "Should I come over?" I asked. "No, don't worry. I'll be home in a few hours. I just need to get some rest." I was already on my way before she finished the sentence. I needed to see her with my own eyes. If she wasn't injured, I'd feel better. But if there was something more to the story, something she wasn't telling me, I needed to know. The hospital wasn't far, just a few blocks down from our place, but those few minutes felt like an eternity. My brain was racing. What happened? How bad is the car? Did she lose control of the wheel? Is she lying to me? When I finally arrived at the hospital, I felt a knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. But when I walked into the waiting room, I saw Clara sitting there, a bit dazed, but smiling at me as though nothing had happened. "Hey," I said, walking over to her. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine," she said a little too quickly. Her hand was trembling slightly when she reached out for mine, but she covered it up by brushing her hair back. I tried to study her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. There was something in her eyes, something that didn't match the words coming out of her mouth. I decided to hold back, let her tell her story in her own time. The doctors came in, gave her a quick once-over, and assured me there was no lasting damage. But when they discharged her an hour later, I couldn't shake the feeling that the whole thing was strange. We drove home in silence. Clara kept glancing at me from the passenger seat, but I didn't speak up. What could I say? The worst was over. But when we pulled into our driveway, things took a turn. I went to check on the car, just to see how bad the damage was. The front bumper was dented, the hood crumpled. Not great, but it wasn't anything we couldn't fix. Still, the car looked a lot worse than Clara had described. She had mentioned a fender bender, but this looked like it had been in a much more serious collision. I bent down to get a closer look, and that's when I saw it. Something was off about the driver's side door. It had been slightly forced open, like someone had tried to pry it open. Not a huge deal, but why would the door be bent like that? It didn't make sense. I opened the door, and that's when my heart dropped. A piece of fabric was stuck under the seat, a torn piece of what looked like a shirt. It wasn't Clara's shirt. I knew that for sure. Clara's clothes were always neat, pressed, and carefully chosen. This was a dark, almost rough material, the kind of fabric you might see in a shirt that wasn't hers. My mind raced. Had she been in the car with someone else? Had someone else been in the car when the accident happened? I tried to stay calm, tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was just some random thing. Maybe she had borrowed a friend's jacket, or maybe it wasn't even that big a deal. But the more I thought about it, the more my gut told me something was off. I had to know the truth. I didn't confront her right away. That would have been too much. Instead, I pocketed the piece of fabric and got back in the car. We were already on our way to the house, and Clara was talking about how we could fix the car soon. But I could barely focus on what she was saying. All I could think about was that fabric. When we got home, I made an excuse to go upstairs. I told Clara I was going to check the attic for something we needed, but really, I just needed a moment to breathe. I sat in the attic for a while, thinking, trying to piece everything together. What did I know? Clara wasn't hurt, that much was clear. But why had she lied about the severity of the accident? Why had she said nothing about being with someone else? That was when I realized something truly terrifying. The fabric wasn't the only thing I had found that day. There was a piece of paper, a receipt from a bar across town. It was signed by Clara, but the time on the receipt? It didn't match the time she had told me about. The more I looked at it, the clearer it became. Something wasn't adding up, and I knew, deep down, that the truth was worse than anything I could imagine. I couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread that gnawed at me as I stared at that receipt. It wasn't just the fabric. The receipt was the final piece of the puzzle I didn't even know I was putting together. Clara had been at a bar just a few hours before the accident. I ran the numbers in my head. She told me she was running errands, stopping by the grocery store. But that receipt? It was from a place she had never mentioned, a bar I didn't even know she liked. It didn't make sense. If Clara had been there, why hadn't she told me? I sat in the attic for what felt like hours, staring at the crumpled receipt. The paper was thin, but there was no mistaking the time it was stamped with, 3:45 p.m. Clara had told me the accident happened at 4:15, but that didn't line up. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe the bar was near the grocery store, or she had stopped there on the way home. But something in my gut told me this wasn't just a random detail. I couldn't sit there anymore. I needed to talk to Clara, but I wasn't sure how to approach it. Should I confront her directly, ask her about the bar? Or should I play it cool and see if she would slip up? I didn't know if I was ready to hear the truth, but I knew I couldn't ignore it either. When I finally made my way downstairs, I found Clara in the kitchen, making tea like nothing had happened. She was humming quietly, her back turned to me as she stirred the boiling water. Everything about her was calm, collected, almost serene, a stark contrast to the storm that was brewing inside me. Clara, I started, trying to keep my voice steady. I found something in your car today. She turned around, her eyes briefly flicking to the small fabric in my hand before meeting my gaze. What do you mean? What did you find? The way she asked was too casual, as if she already knew. My suspicions grew stronger. There was a piece of fabric stuck under the seat. It didn't look like yours. And I also found something else, a receipt from a bar. I watched her face closely for any signs of guilt or surprise, but she didn't react the way I expected. A bar? She asked, her tone slightly amused. What are you talking about? I haven't been to a bar in months. I felt my pulse quicken. The lie was so thin, so transparent. The receipt was from last week, Clara. I can see the time on it. 3:45 p.m. That's not the time you were at the grocery store, is it? Her expression faltered for the briefest moment before she straightened, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I don't know why it's in the car. I must have gone there after I left the store. I didn't think you'd mind. I stared at her, my heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't making sense. Clara, you told me you were running errands. You didn't mention going to a bar. Why didn't you just tell me the truth? I don't see why it matters, Jack, she said, her voice suddenly sharper, defensive. I went to a bar. Big deal. It's not like I'm hiding anything. But I could hear the lie in her voice. I could see it in the way she avoided my gaze. There was more to this, more than she was letting on. And at that moment, I realized something else. The accident wasn't an accident. It wasn't just a mistake or a freak occurrence. Clara was hiding something, and I needed to know what it was. I put the receipt down on the counter, my mind racing. How much did you drink at that bar, Clara? Were you drinking when the accident happened? Her eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to speak, but the words got stuck. She was caught off guard, and for a split second, I saw the mask slip. She was hiding something, but it wasn't just about the bar. It wasn't just about the accident. There was something bigger at play here, something that terrified me more than the idea of her being at a bar without telling me. I wasn't drunk, Jack, she finally said, her voice much quieter. I just had one drink. But I didn't think it mattered. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. I didn't know what I was expecting her to say, but it sure wasn't this. Was she trying to downplay the situation, or was she really this calm about it? I needed to dig deeper, but I had to be careful. If I pushed too hard, she might just shut down completely. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. But Clara wasn't done. Her tone shifted again, this time laced with something more forceful. Look, Jack, I didn't think it was a big deal. I don't want to fight about it. What happened, happened. I'm okay, the car's a mess, and we can move on. But I couldn't just move on. Not when the pieces didn't add up. Not when everything felt like it was falling apart. My marriage, my trust, the foundation of everything I thought was real. Clara, you're not telling me something. The fabric, the bar, this accident, it's all connected. And I won't let it go. She sighed, rubbing her forehead as if she was worn out from this conversation, as if I was the one causing the problem. Jack, I'm sorry, but if you keep pushing, you're going to find something you're not ready for. Her words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. What wasn't I ready for? What was she keeping from me? Before I could ask her any more questions, the sound of a knock at the door interrupted us. It was too much of a coincidence. I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. My heart sank as I went to answer the door. When I opened it, I was met with the last person I ever expected to see. Standing in front of me was a man I didn't recognize, tall, dressed in a leather jacket, his face calm but his eyes cold. He didn't introduce himself. Instead, he just handed me an envelope. Clara needs to talk to you, he said, his voice low. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, the envelope burning a hole in my hand. The man's figure receded into the darkness as I stood frozen, the envelope still gripped in my hand. 1,000 questions flooded my mind, but one was louder than the rest. Who was that man? His eyes, cold, unblinking, felt like a warning. There was something unsettling about the whole exchange. Clara had been acting strange, but this was something else entirely. I glanced back inside the house, my mind still reeling. Clara had gone silent, watching me from the kitchen doorway. Her expression was unreadable, but I saw her shoulders tense the moment the man disappeared. I stepped back inside, still holding the envelope, and placed it on the kitchen counter. Clara, who was that? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked slowly over to the counter, her fingers brushing lightly against the envelope as though it was something dangerous. I didn't expect him to come tonight, she finally murmured, her voice distant. Expect him? My chest tightened. Clara, who is he? And why is he bringing me an envelope with your name on it? She hesitated, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. I wasn't supposed to be involved with this anymore, she whispered. I didn't want you to find out. I thought I could keep it all buried. I felt a chill run down my spine. The air in the room felt thicker now, heavier with the weight of her words. Buried? What are you talking about, Clara? What is this about? Her eyes dropped to the envelope on the counter, her hands trembling slightly. I could tell she was struggling with whether to tell me the truth, but I couldn't wait any longer. Clara, tell me what's going on. Who is this man, and why is he handing me this envelope? You've got to stop with the secrets. She closed her eyes briefly, a deep sigh escaping her lips before she lifted her head to face me. Jack, this isn't easy, but you have to understand, I never meant for any of this to happen. She paused, collecting herself, then reached out and grabbed the envelope, tearing it open slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. She unfolded it with careful hands, her gaze flicking over the contents before her face went pale. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, and then, without a word, she slid the paper toward me. I didn't take it right away. I was still processing everything she'd said. Clara, my wife, the woman I thought I knew, had been hiding something much darker than a simple fender bender. This man, whoever he was, and this envelope, they were a part of something that went far beyond a car accident. Finally, my curiosity got the better of me, and I reached for the paper. I unfolded it quickly, and what I saw nearly stopped my heart. It was a photograph, a photo of Clara, but not in the way I was used to seeing her. This was a picture from years ago, taken at a bar, one of the places I knew she hadn't been in a long time. She was laughing with a man I didn't recognize, and the way they were standing close, their body language, it was clear they were more than just acquaintances. Clara's expression wasn't just friendly, it was intimate. I looked up at Clara, the weight of the photo sinking in. What the hell is this, Clara? Her face twisted with guilt, but she didn't look away. His name is Victor, she said quietly, her voice shaking. He's someone from my past. Someone I tried to forget. Victor. The name echoed in my mind, but I couldn't place it. You didn't tell me about him before. Why? What's going on with you and him? Clara swallowed hard, her eyes flicking nervously to the photograph again. Victor is, well, he used to be more than a friend. He was involved in some things I didn't want to drag you into. I left all of that behind when I met you. I thought I was safe from it. But he came back, Jack. And now he's threatening me. Threatening you. My voice rose, disbelief flooding my veins. What are you talking about? Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Because I didn't want to bring this mess into our life, Jack, Clara whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't want you to get involved. I didn't want to lose you. I stood there, trying to process everything. My mind was spinning, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The accident wasn't just an accident. Clara hadn't been at the grocery store that day. She hadn't been the calm, safe woman I thought I knew. She had been hiding something dangerous, and now, this man named Victor had resurfaced. Victor is the one who put the fabric in the car, isn't he? I asked, my voice tight with fury. Clara nodded, her eyes filled with regret. Yes, he's been watching me. He said if I didn't meet him, if I didn't play along, he'd come after both of us. Her voice broke on the last part. I felt like the ground beneath me was shaking. Victor wasn't just some old flame, some mistake from the past. He was a threat, a serious one, and he wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted. Clara, what does he want? I demanded, the fear in my voice cutting through the tension. What is this all about? She shook her head, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. I don't know, Jack. I thought I was done with all of this. But when he showed up tonight, when I saw him at that bar again, I knew he wasn't going to let me go that easily. He wants something from me, and I think he's willing to do whatever it takes to get it. I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. This wasn't just some simple love triangle or a betrayal. This was something much darker. Clara had been involved in something dangerous, and now I was a part of it too, whether I liked it or not. The pieces were falling into place, but there were still too many unanswered questions. Who was Victor really? What did he want from Clara? And why had he come back now, after all these years? I looked at Clara, the woman I had shared my life with, and I realized with a sickening certainty that the life I thought I had was a lie. And the worst part? I didn't know how deep this rabbit hole went. The tension in the room was suffocating. Clara was sitting across from me, her face pale, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I could feel her fear radiating through the air. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be. There was no going back now. Whatever had been lurking beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life had finally come to light, and I was caught in the middle of it. Victor's name kept echoing in my mind. What did he want? And why did Clara think she could handle this on her own? The picture, the mysterious envelope, the bar, it all pointed to something far more dangerous than a simple love affair or a broken promise. Clara had been hiding something huge from me, something that had put both of us in danger. I stood up, my mind racing. Clara, you have to tell me everything. I can't just sit here and wait for this guy to come after us. What kind of things was Victor involved in? What exactly are you running from? Her eyes were locked on the floor, and I could tell she was torn. She wanted to tell me. I could see it in the way she fidgeted with her fingers, but the words wouldn't come out. She had been carrying this burden alone for so long. I could tell it was hard for her to let anyone else in. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Clara looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and fear. Victor was part of a group, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. A group that's, well, it's not exactly legal. They were into things, organized crime, smuggling, you name it. I didn't know the full extent of it when I got involved with him, but I soon realized I had made a mistake. I tried to get out, Jack. I really did. But people like Victor, they don't let you go that easily. My heart sank as she spoke. I hadn't expected this. I knew Clara had a past, but this? This was something I couldn't have imagined in a million years. My wife, my seemingly perfect wife, had been entangled in something so dark, so dangerous, that I couldn't even wrap my head around it. Clara, how long have you been keeping this from me? I asked, my voice shaking. How long have you been involved with him? With all of this? She looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt. It started before we met, but I thought I could leave it behind when we got married. I didn't want you to know about it. I thought it was in the past, but when Victor showed up, I couldn't pretend anymore. I leaned back against the counter, trying to process everything she had just said. I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. My mind was racing, questions flying at me faster than I could keep up. How much of this life was she hiding? How could I have missed all the signs? I had trusted her with everything, and now I was left questioning everything I thought I knew. So what does he want now? Why is he threatening us? I asked, my voice desperate. What is it that he's after, Clara? Clara took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought she was going to tell me it was all over, that Victor was just trying to scare her, and that everything would go back to normal. But instead, she looked at me, her expression dark and serious. "He wants me back in," she said quietly. "He wants me to help them with one last job." I felt my stomach twist. A job? What kind of job? Clara bit her lip, her fingers trembling as she traced the edge of the table. "I don't know the full details, but I know it's bad, Jack. It's something dangerous. They're planning something big, something that could put us all at risk. And if I don't help them, if I don't play along, I know what they'll do. They'll come after you. They'll come after everything we've built together." The room felt colder. The walls seemed to close in around me as her words sank in. They're planning something big. I couldn't even begin to imagine what that could mean, but the fear in her voice told me it was nothing good. I was in this whether I wanted to be or not. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think. I had no idea what to do. Clara had gotten herself into something far beyond what I could handle. And now, I was in it too. This wasn't just about saving our marriage anymore. This was about survival. Surviving Victor. Surviving whatever he was planning. "Clara, you have to go to the police," I said, my voice firm despite the fear that was rising in my chest. "We need to tell them everything. We can't let this go any further." She shook her head quickly, her eyes wide with panic. "No, Jack. If we go to the police, they'll kill us. They'll make sure we disappear. You don't understand. These people, they have connections everywhere. I tried to go to the police before, and they stopped me. We can't trust anyone, not even the police." I felt like I had been slapped. I had no idea how deep this went, but the desperation in Clara's voice, the terror in her eyes, made it clear that we were in over our heads. This wasn't just some petty criminal. This was something organized, something far worse than I could have imagined. "So what do we do then?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "How do we get out of this?" Clara's eyes flickered toward the envelope on the counter, the one Victor had handed me. Her gaze softened for a brief moment, and then she looked at me, determination creeping into her voice. "We play their game," she said. "We do what they want, but we find a way to turn it around. We make them think we're on their side, and then we find a way to get out. It's the only way." I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of playing along with whatever Victor and his crew had planned, but what choice did we have? I couldn't let Clara do this alone, and I certainly couldn't let her face these people without me. I swallowed hard, trying to push my fear aside. "All right, we'll do it. But we do this carefully. No more secrets, Clara. We have to be in this together." She nodded, her eyes hardening with resolve. "Together," she repeated. "We'll figure this out. I swear." But as I stood there, looking at my wife, the woman I thought I knew so well, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late. The path we were about to walk was a dangerous one, and there was no turning back. The next few days passed in a blur, a fog of tension and fear that I couldn't shake. Every time I looked at Clara, my mind spun with 1,000 thoughts. Thoughts about Victor, about what we were getting ourselves into, and about the secrets Clara had been keeping from me all this time. It was like I was living in a nightmare, unable to wake up. We spent the next few days cautiously, keeping a low profile. Clara had insisted that we lay low, avoid making any sudden moves. The last thing we needed was for Victor to know we were onto him. He had his eyes on us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every car that passed by the house, made my heart race. I started checking over my shoulder, wondering if someone was following us, waiting for the right moment to make their move. Clara, on the other hand, was much more composed. She spent hours on the phone with someone, whispering quietly, trying to get more details on what Victor and his crew were planning. But every time I asked her who she was talking to, she dodged the question, her eyes darting away from mine, as if she was hiding something. It made my stomach twist with unease. One evening, after a particularly long day of tense silence, Clara suddenly turned to me with a look in her eyes I hadn't seen before. It was a mix of fear and resolve, the kind of look someone gives when they know they've reached a point of no return. "I think we need to go meet Victor," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. I didn't answer immediately. I just stared at her, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Meet Victor? After everything that had happened, after everything she had just told me, she wanted us to meet him? "Clara, are you out of your mind?" I asked, my voice rising. "Do you think that's a good idea? You heard what he said last time. He's not someone we can trust. We're already in too deep. She shook her head slowly, the fear creeping back into her eyes. No, Jack. I don't think we have a choice anymore. He's not going to stop. He'll come after us whether we want him to or not. We have to go to him. We have to make him think we're cooperating. My heart was pounding in my chest. The thought of facing Victor, of walking into the lion's den, made my skin crawl. I wanted to protect Clara, to get us both out of this mess. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there might not be another way. So what do you suggest we do? I asked, my voice steadying despite the panic that threatened to rise within me. How do we even approach him? Clara looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing the options in her mind. We tell him what he wants to hear. We act like we're on his side, like we're willing to help. But we'll play him, Jack. We'll figure out a way to take him down before it's too late. I don't know exactly how yet, but we'll find a way. I nodded slowly, though doubt gnawed at me. Could I really trust Clara? Was she as committed to this plan as she seemed, or was she just trying to protect herself? I didn't know, and that uncertainty was like a weight around my neck. But for now, I didn't have a better idea. We go tomorrow, Clara said, her voice firm. It's time. The next morning, we drove out of the city, Clara navigating the familiar back roads that led to the outskirts, to a place I'd never been before. The landscape seemed to change as we got farther from the city. The houses grew smaller, the roads more desolate. It felt like we were entering another world, a place where nothing was as it seemed, a place where danger lurked just beyond the horizon. Finally, we arrived at a small, dilapidated building on the edge of a warehouse district. The kind of place where no one asked questions, where things were done in the shadows. Clara parked the car, her eyes scanning the area. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. We're here, she said quietly, but there was no mistaking the fear in her voice now. It was raw, unfiltered, and it made my heart race even faster. I took a deep breath and nodded. All right, let's do this. We stepped out of the car, walking toward the building with slow, deliberate steps. Every noise seemed amplified. The crunch of gravel beneath our shoes, the distant hum of traffic, the faint whisper of the wind. My mind kept returning to Victor, to his cold, calculating eyes. I didn't know what kind of man he was, but I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't someone to be taken lightly. As we approached the door, Clara paused, her hand resting on the handle. Remember, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, we play it cool. Don't let him see any weakness. I nodded again, though I couldn't help the knot in my stomach. I wasn't ready for this, but we were already here. There was no turning back. Clara pushed the door open, and we stepped inside. The space was dark, the only light coming from a few flickering overhead bulbs. The air was thick with the smell of dust and oil. It was a warehouse, but it felt more like a prison. The walls were lined with crates and large metal containers, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. In the far corner, sitting at a table under a dim light, was Victor. His back was to us, but I could feel his presence as soon as we walked in. He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge our arrival. It was like he was waiting for us. Clara stepped forward, her heels clicking loudly against the concrete floor. Victor, she called out, her voice steady but with a hint of tension. We're here. Victor turned slowly, his eyes cold and calculating as they locked onto mine. You came, he said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. I didn't expect you to be so cooperative. I forced myself to meet his gaze, even though every fiber of my being was telling me to turn and run. We're here, Victor. Let's talk. He smiled, a slow, sinister grin that sent a chill down my spine. Good. I was hoping you'd see things my way. And with that, everything shifted. The game was officially on. Victor's smile was unervingly calm, almost like he had been expecting this moment for a long time. I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on me, each second stretching into an eternity. Clara and I exchanged a quick glance, and though her expression was determined, I could see the flicker of fear behind her eyes. This was no longer just a meeting, it was a test, and we had to pass it, no matter what it took. Victor gestured toward the table where 2 chairs were positioned. Please, he said, his voice dripping with cold hospitality. Take a seat. We have much to discuss. We walked cautiously toward the table, and I couldn't help but notice the way the dim light flickered above us, casting long shadows across the floor. The whole place felt like something out of a bad thriller, too dark, too quiet. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to turn around and run. But Clara had already made the decision. We were in this, whether we liked it or not. We sat down, and Victor's eyes never left us. His gaze felt like it was piercing through me, examining every tiny movement, every reaction. He wasn't just trying to intimidate us. He was testing us, seeing how much we knew, how much we could take. It was clear that he had control, and that made everything worse. "So, you two finally decided to show up," Victor said, his tone casual, but there was a dark edge beneath his words. "I've been waiting for this day. I knew Clara would come crawling back eventually. She always does." Clara stiffened beside me, but she kept her voice even as she replied, "I'm here, Victor. Let's get this over with." He laughed softly, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent room. "Oh, Clara, always so eager to get to the point. You've always been like that, haven't you? But don't worry, we're going to get to the point. The job I have for you. Well, let's just say it's something that will make both of us a lot of money." I could feel the tension between us, like an invisible wire pulling taut. He was playing his cards carefully, and we had no choice but to play along. But the more he spoke, the more uneasy I became. Money was never the issue here. This wasn't about a simple job or a financial deal. This was something much darker, something dangerous. "I'm listening," Clara said, leaning forward slightly, her eyes never leaving his. Victor leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled in front of him. "I need you, Clara, to help me with a little operation. It's simple enough, really. We're just moving a few things around, making sure certain people get what they're owed. But there's a catch." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air like a threat. I felt my stomach twist. There was always a catch. "What kind of catch?" I asked, my voice sharp despite the fear swirling inside me. I wasn't going to let him control this conversation. Not yet. Victor's eyes shifted to me, a slight glimmer of amusement in his gaze. "Ah, the boyfriend speaks. How cute. But let's be honest here, Jack. You're in this too now, whether you like it or not. This isn't just about Clara. If you want to protect her, you'll do exactly what I say." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could feel the blood drain from my face as the realization sank in. He wasn't just manipulating Clara. He was manipulating me too. He knew that I cared about her. He knew that I would do anything to keep her safe. And that was exactly what he was counting on. "What do you want us to do?" Clara asked, her voice steady but laced with something that sounded like dread. Victor's smile widened, his eyes narrowing as he leaned in slightly. "You're going to help me move a shipment. Something valuable. Something that's worth more than you can imagine. But it's not just the money that matters to me. It's the people behind it. You see, this shipment, it's not just any ordinary cargo. It belongs to someone very powerful. And if we don't deliver it exactly as promised, we'll have a lot more to worry about than just Victor." A chill ran down my spine at the mention of someone very powerful. I knew enough about this world to understand that this was no small-time operation. We were in over our heads, and there was no way out unless we played the game. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that helping Victor wasn't just dangerous, it was a death sentence. For all we knew, he might be setting us up to take the fall. Clara shifted in her seat, her gaze focused on Victor, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. "What happens if we don't do this?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into it. Victor's smile faded, and the coldness in his eyes deepened. "If you don't do this, Clara, then you and Jack will become a problem. And trust me, problems get dealt with quickly around here. You don't want to be one of those problems." I could see Clara tense, but she didn't flinch. She held his gaze, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. But I could feel her fear, and I could see that this wasn't just a negotiation. It was a test of loyalty, of power. Victor was playing us both like pawns in a much bigger game, and there was no way we could walk away from this without consequences. "We'll do it," Clara said finally, her voice resolute. "But we need details. We need to know exactly what you want from us." Victor chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair again. "I like your attitude, Clara. You're not as naive as I thought. Fine, I'll give you the details. The shipment is scheduled to leave at midnight tonight. You'll pick it up, transport it, and deliver it to the contact I'll give you. Simple, right?" I could tell from the look in Clara's eyes that she was trying to think of a way out, but there wasn't one. Not here. Not now. We were trapped in this mess, and the only way to survive was to play by Victor's rules. "All right, she said quietly. We'll do it. But we need to know who the contact is. Victor's smile returned, colder than before. You'll meet him when you arrive. No names. No faces. Just business. I felt a surge of unease. The more Victor spoke, the more it became clear that we were walking into a trap. But what choice did we have? Backing out now would be suicide. Victor stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the concrete floor. Good. I knew you'd make the right choice. Now get ready. This will be a test for both of you. Let's see if you can handle the pressure. As he turned to walk toward the back of the warehouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing right into his hands. But as I glanced over at Clara, I could see that she felt the same way. We had no idea what was waiting for us in the dark, but one thing was certain. The stakes had just been raised, and there was no turning back. The next few hours felt like a blur. Clara and I went back to the car in silence, the weight of what we were about to do hanging heavily between us. There was no turning back now. We had crossed the point of no return. What we had just agreed to was dangerous, more dangerous than I had anticipated, and the stakes were higher than either of us fully understood. The only thing I knew for sure was that we had to follow through. Our survival depended on it. Clara drove with steady hands, but I could see the tension in her body, in the way her fingers gripped the wheel. We didn't speak much on the way to the rendezvous point, both of us lost in our thoughts. I kept replaying the conversation with Victor over and over in my head, trying to piece together the fragments of what he had told us. The shipment, the powerful people, the vague reference to business. I still didn't trust him, but I had no choice but to follow his instructions. If we didn't, there was no telling what would happen. If we failed, it wasn't just our lives at risk. It was everything we had worked for, everything we had built. The drive took longer than I expected. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the streets grew darker, quieter. The city felt empty, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. Clara turned off the main road, following a narrow, winding street toward an industrial area at the edge of town. The buildings here were old, decrepit, long abandoned by anyone who cared. The further we went, the more isolated it felt. No lights, no cars, no people. Just the hum of our engine and the distant sounds of the city behind us. When we finally reached the warehouse, it looked exactly like the one we had met Victor in. Large, steel, and seemingly abandoned. The only sign of life was a single car parked in front. No other vehicles. No lights. Just the looming silence. Clara stopped the car a few yards away, her headlights cutting through the dark. We both sat there for a moment, the engine idling, neither of us willing to be the first to speak. What do we do now? I finally asked, my voice almost a whisper. The fear was gnawing at me, but I couldn't let it show. Not now. Clara didn't answer immediately. She just stared ahead, her face hardening with resolve. Then, with a deep breath, she spoke. We go in. Just like Victor said. We stick to the plan. I nodded, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when we walked into that building, but it sure wasn't this. The unknown. The uncertainty of what was waiting for us. The shadowy figures behind Victor's operation. Everything about this felt wrong, but we had no choice. We couldn't back out now. Clara turned off the car and opened the door, stepping out into the night. I followed her, trying to keep my movements slow and steady. My heart was pounding, and the tightness in my chest wasn't going away. We walked toward the entrance, the air thick with tension, the sound of our footsteps echoing on the concrete. When we reached the door, it creaked open with a low, groaning sound, and we stepped inside. The dim light from the street outside barely illuminated the vast, empty space. The walls were lined with steel shelves, some stacked high with crates, others empty and abandoned. The smell of dust and metal filled the air. I could feel the weight of the place, the heaviness of the situation settling in my bones. We didn't have to wait long. A man emerged from the shadows, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket and sunglasses, even though it was night. His face was obscured, but there was no mistaking the authority in his presence. He didn't speak at first. He just watched us, his eyes calculating. Then, he motioned for us to follow him without a word. Clara glanced at me briefly, her face unreadable, before she nodded and started to follow him. I did the same, keeping my steps even. The man led us deeper into the warehouse, through a labyrinth of narrow aisles and into a small room at the back. The door closed behind us with a soft thud, and we were left standing in the dim light, surrounded by shadows. Victor's expecting you, the man said gruffly, his voice low and clipped. You know the deal. Do your part, and you'll get what you're owed. There was no warmth in his voice, no offer of reassurance. Just cold business. Clara didn't respond, but I could feel her tension rising again. I could tell that she was trying to keep her composure, but I could see the way her shoulders were tight, the way her fingers clenched at her sides. This was it. This was the moment when everything we had done until now would either come to a head, or it would all fall apart. A few moments passed in heavy silence, and then the man turned, walking toward a small table at the far side of the room. On it sat a large black duffel bag, its contents hidden. He didn't say a word, just gestured toward it. Take it, he instructed, his tone as cold as ever. Clara stepped forward without hesitation, but I stayed back, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of what might be waiting for us. I knew the game was starting, but I didn't know the rules. Clara grabbed the bag, her face set in grim determination. The moment she did, I felt something shift in the air, a heaviness, a shift in the balance of power. It was like we had just signed an invisible contract. We had crossed a line we couldn't come back from. She turned to me and nodded, silently asking if I was ready. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know if I was ready. But I nodded anyway. This was happening. There was no backing out now. Let's go, she said, her voice steady. We turned to leave the room, but as we did, the door swung open, and another figure stepped inside. It was Victor. His cold smile met us before his eyes did, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all playing roles in a game none of us fully understood. Nice to see you again, he said smoothly, his voice almost too calm. I trust everything's in order. Clara said nothing, but I could tell she was tense, ready for whatever came next. My own nerves were on edge, but I tried to maintain control. This was it. We were in this together now, and there was no turning back. Everything's fine, I said, trying to sound confident, though my voice betrayed me with a slight tremor. Victor's smile grew wider, almost predatory. Good. Now, let's see how you handle the next step. And with that, he turned and walked back into the shadows. The game was on, and we were just getting started. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind, a chaotic blur of decisions, risks, and uncertainty. After that night in the warehouse, Clara and I found ourselves plunged deeper into a world we didn't fully understand, but every move we made brought us closer to the edge. The shipment, the people involved, Victor's mysterious threats, it all seemed like a web we could never untangle. But as much as we feared what was coming next, I also began to see something else. Clara. She was strong, resourceful, and more determined than I had ever known her to be. Every step we took, she took it with a quiet resolve, never backing down, always staying focused on the end goal. I was beginning to see that the woman I thought I knew was capable of far more than I had ever imagined. We had delivered the shipment, as Victor had ordered. Every part of me screamed that we were walking straight into a trap, but Clara kept assuring me that we were doing the right thing, that we just had to stay calm and play our cards right. She had a plan, and even though I didn't fully understand it, I trusted her. It was late one evening when the final confrontation came. Clara and I had arranged to meet Victor one last time. It was the moment of truth, the moment where we either walked away free or we paid the price for our involvement. Clara's plan had been risky, and as I walked into that warehouse once again, I felt my heart race. Victor was already there, leaning against the same old wooden table, his signature smirk plastered on his face. But this time, there was a different energy in the room. The air felt less tense, less suffocating. I looked at Clara, and she gave me a small, reassuring nod. I could see it now, her confidence, her composure. She was in control. I see you've done your part, Victor said, his eyes flicking between the two of us. I swallowed hard but held my ground. We did what you asked, I said. Now it's over. We're done. Victor looked at Clara, a moment of silence hanging in the air before he spoke again. You think it's over? He asked, almost mockingly. You think you've won? I felt my pulse quicken. Was this the moment where everything went wrong? But then Clara stepped forward, her eyes narrowing, her posture firm. We're done, Victor, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. You can walk away, or we can go straight to the authorities. Either way, the game is over. For a long moment, Victor didn't speak. His gaze lingered on Clara, then on me, as if trying to read us. But something in the air shifted. The power dynamic that had once been firmly in his hands was now in ours. He could see that we weren't bluffing. Finally, Victor let out a deep sigh and stood up straight. His shoulders relaxed as if the weight of the situation had finally dawned on him. "You think you've won?" he repeated, but this time it didn't sound as menacing. It was almost resigned. "Maybe you have." Clara and I exchanged a look, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt a sense of hope rise within me. It wasn't over yet, but we had just taken the first step toward freedom. Victor took a long breath, then gave us a curt nod. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said, his voice softer now. "You're free to go. No more games." The weight that had been hanging over us for so long seemed to lift in that instant. We were free, but it wasn't just freedom from Victor, from the operation, from the lies and the fear. It was the freedom to reclaim our lives, our trust, and our future. I looked at Clara, and for the first time in days, I saw a spark of relief in her eyes. She had done it. She had gotten us through the worst of it. We turned to leave the warehouse, not looking back, not giving a second thought to the shadows that once held us captive. The cool night air hit my face as we stepped outside, the distant hum of the city filling the silence. The world felt different now, brighter, lighter, as if the darkness that had consumed us was finally behind us. "I can't believe it's over," I said quietly, my voice filled with disbelief and relief. Clara glanced over at me, her face softening. "It's over. For now, anyway. But we'll take it one step at a time." We walked to the car together, side by side, and I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. We had faced the darkest part of our lives, and we had come out the other side stronger, closer, and more connected than ever before. As Clara started the car and we drove away from the warehouse, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. We had fought through the storm, and now we had the chance to rebuild, not just our lives, but our trust, our relationship. We were free, and together, we could face anything.